Baker Show.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome back, everyone. I'm Kev Baker, and this is today's Kev Baker Show right here on Truth Frequency Radio, www.tfrlive.com. Isn't that just typical? Just as soon as we go on air, I need to clear my throat. But I want to thank everyone for coming back in your numbers tonight, and what a brilliant way we have to kick off the week. And I'll get to that in just a moment, folks. But let me just tell you what's coming up in the rest of the week right here. I'm telling you, the month of January is absolutely jamming. Some of the people I've got lined up already, and some of the others that I'm just waiting to confirm, are going to blow your mind. And you're certainly going to see that I really am going to be raising the bar right here. For all of you out there, I've got to bring you the best information, and we've got to keep on bringing you new guests all the time. And tonight, certainly no different. But tomorrow night, I'm going to be rejoined by my good friend and somebody that you've all come to love and enjoy over the months, over the years that I've been doing shows with, Ben Emlyn Jones. And with so much going on in the skies overhead and the paranormal world, Brexit, all the topics that Ben likes to cover, which is just about everything, what better time to do our first show of the year? And then on Wednesday night, really looking forward to this one because we're going to have a couple of new guests coming onto the show. Going to be joined by a fellow radio host called Ella Free. And not only that, we're going to be talking to an NSA whistleblower. So that is on Wednesday right here on KBS. And then on Thursday, to round off the week, we're going to have another first-time guest. Deborah Tavares is coming onto the show. And she is going to be breaking some news right here that you haven't heard anywhere else. That's right, folks. So all of that to come in the week ahead. And remember, the Kev Baker Show, proudly sponsored by Get the Tea over at getthetea.com. I'll be telling you more about that as the show progresses. But tonight we are kicking off the week in style because I'm going to be joined by Chris and Anita Intenzo, all the way from the USA. And Anita and Chris have first-hand experience of the dark forces and the supernatural that we often talk about right here on the show. Now, Anita just happens to also be the author of A State of Horror and then the sequel called Dark Transference. So tonight we're really going to drill down and try to get to the bottom and the heart of these hauntings and so much more. Now, you may have heard Chris and Anita on the show briefly one time when we had our mutual friend and somebody that you've all come to love and enjoy out there, the brilliant spiritual warrior himself, Bill Bean. I want to give a big shout out to Bill if he's listening tonight, because if it was not for Bill, then I certainly wouldn't be here doing this. Chris and Anita wouldn't be in a position where they're able to come on and talk about some of the stuff that we're going to be getting into. And I know that Bill has touched, actually, personally, a lot of the listeners to this show. He certainly is a man that has touched many lives and continues to help so many people, including Chris and Anita. So, guys, welcome back to the show. And like I was saying during the day, I'm a bit scatterbrained, so I'm just really, really grateful that we managed to line this show up. And I tend to find these shows that come together right at the last minute, they always seem to be the best, and tonight's going to be no different. So, Anita, Chris, welcome back.
Thanks for having
us back
have us on the show, Kev.
It's absolutely brilliant. And like I say, you have been on the show briefly before, but because we had to cram so much into just over an hour of radio with Bill as well, I'm really looking forward to us taking our time tonight to listening to both of your stories and getting right to the heart of what I'm calling these dark forces, the hauntings that myself and others talk about so much. It's one thing, Anita, me talking about these things, and I have had a brief encounter with dark forces, but nothing compared to some of the experiences that you and your son, Chris, have had. So I want to take us right to the start of things and tell us a little bit about yourself, Anita, and how you got into this paranormal realm.
Well, thanks again, Kevin, for having us back on your show, and it's really been great, and I'm glad it was able to come together tonight. And sometimes, as you said, spontaneity is the best. So we you know, my son Chris and I really just stumbled into this whole paranormal world, we call it, 10 years ago. It will be 10 years, January 19th, that we have been on this journey. And it started when a friend of mine who was an anthropologist and a good friend for 30 years passed away suddenly from a heart attack. And I was made executor of his estate. And it was my responsibility after his sudden death to go to his home, evaluate with the lawyer what was required of me in his will to take care of. And one of those provisions was to clear his house out for a sale. And since the money from the sale would go to a charity of his, he nominated certain charities, and the one main one was going to get the proceeds from the house. And my son and I had to go in and were shocked at finding it was a hoarder's type of house, that he had not invited me to his home for a year or so. And I didn't know he had been ill. He wasn't feeling up to himself. And when he died suddenly, I went into the house not knowing the condition of it. I mean, it was clean, but it just had so much stuff in it. And for the next 10 months, Chris and I were there on a weekly basis, sometimes 40 hours a week, so we can start getting the things bundled together, go through everything meticulously, because in a 7-page will that he had left, there were many things that had to go to certain people. Some people lived across the continent. They lived out west. Some people were in Europe that we had to send things that he mentioned in the will that they were to get. And in that process of cleaning out his house, we started encountering what we call paranormal activity. We didn't know at the time what we were really facing, because it started with poltergeist activity, things being thrown against the wall, especially in the basement. That's where the activity really started to happen. And Chris and I were facing this every time we went into the house, that we would have to start cleaning up, and made some type of a daily routine, because it just took so much time for us to go through everything and to get the house cleared out within the year. We were there for over 10 months. And must be when we started clearing out, especially the basement, it seemed to actually generate activity, and all hell broke loose. And in the process, being novices that we were never on any type of ghost hunting type of activity. We've watched some of the shows, and we're fans of some of the different actors and people who represented their shows in the paranormal community, but never living it. And it was a frightening, really, really unusual type of thing that we would witness. And Chris, you're the first one that started telling me things were not right on that side of the basement when things were being moved around.
Yeah, I mean, you could definitely feel some kind of atmospheric changes, I think, a lot when we were moving a lot of the boxes, or just any of the stuff that he had really in the house. Like kind of almost the hair on the back of your neck kind of standing up, maybe feeling pressure in your head, or maybe your ears ringing or something of that nature, and never really having anything like that happen before until that point. You're just kind of like saying, okay, maybe I'm overworked a little bit. We've been here, a few days kind of like, not doing this all the time, and all of a sudden, you're lifting heavy stuff, you're moving a lot of things. So maybe it was just, you're kind of chalking it up to that. But then when it persists, and then when you start having, the paranormal activity, different things start in the house, then that's almost like proof for itself that it's starting to show you, like, hey, whatever's here is here, and it wants to be known.
Yeah, it takes away any of the kind of question marks or the ambiguity. And I have to ask you, Anita, I mean, did your friend ever mention any of this in the kind of years beforehand during your friendship, that there was any activity in the house, anything like that?
No, he didn't, Kevin. I knew him for 30 years. He was a world traveler. He collected many, many different types of objects in his travels. He was a Mayan Indian expert who spent at least 15 times. He had been down to South America and Mexico studying the Mayan culture, and in Guatemala. But it was the only thing I could remember after his dear mother passed away in 2001, and he was exceptionally close to her. He took good care of her before she passed away. He had said to me, he was playing music that she liked to hear, and and it seemed to soothe his grief that he would hear the music in the house that he would play. But then he said to me, I have a sense that I feel her, that she's close by. And we were talking on the phone, and I said, Paul, if that's the case, it would be a loving presence if she is there, because you were such a devoted son to her. And I'm sure she's just really there to watch out for you and be grateful that you were able to take care of her before she passed. And that was the only time. But he did say something to me one time. He said, if I go first, and I cut him off in the conversation. I said, what do you mean? I said, you're a young guy. What do you mean if you go first? He said, no, if I go first, or, if anything happens to one of us, would you promise that you try to get in touch with, me, or you get, or I'll get in touch with you, touch with you. And I didn't even go further with the conversation because I thought it was morbid. I said, no. I said, let's not talk about that. You have a long life ahead of you. I'm sorry your mother passed, but let's not go there. Let's not talk about that. But, but he made me promise. He said, just promise me, just let's just make a little bargain here. If something happened to either one of us, we'd look out, or, maybe get in touch with each other. So that was the only thing that I thought was very unusual. But I chalked it up because of the recent death of his mother, that he felt like he needed to know, like, if there's something else that could be reached from the other veil, and I was his closest friend. So I thought, well, if that makes him feel better. But we never spoke about it again after that. But with only, I guess, let me see, that was 2001. Then he passed away in 2009. So that was like, I don't know if he had an inkling or he had some type of prophetic, seeing ahead, but that always stuck in back of my mind. And I write about that in the first book where, I mentioned that conversation.
Now, I have to ask, and we're going to be speculating here, and I don't want to sound insensitive, guys, but do you think maybe the whole hoarding thing came around and him kind of slipping into illness? Do you think this could have been affected by some of the forces that were obviously been stirred up and in that property in the first place?
Well, I'll tell you, Kevin, that is a great point to bring up, because that is something we've broached the subject to each other, to even Bill. The hoarding issue was something that was very unexpected, because after his mother died, I think things escalated. I never saw, when his mother and father were alive, when I was invited over to the house, there wasn't any inkling of like piles of things everywhere. It was always neat and clean. His mother was a wonderful German background cook. She had always made wonderful desserts. And it was just really very surprising to me when my son and I went into the house the day after he passed away. And we just looked around, and Chris is the one who first said, he goes, Mom, he must have been really suffering, or there must have been something really going on with him, that he seemed to have piles of things everywhere. His writing, where he would write with his, he only used a typewriter. He never used a keyboard with a computer. And there were things, there was Christmas presents were on a chair that were actually meant for me, that I saw a tag on one that he hadn't gotten over yet to my house. We had talked before the holidays, before Christmas, and he actually was over for lunch at my house, and I hugged and kissed him goodbye and said, we'll see each other soon. He goes, oh yeah, we'll get together around Christmas. And here I found I was crying when I saw the presents on the chair that were meant for me, that he hadn't gotten over to my house. And as I said, it was only a few weeks after the holidays that he passed suddenly. But the hoarding issue was a very problematic thing for us, because we had to go through so much stuff, and the stress on us, it seemed like it was kind of going hand in hand. Whatever was there at the house took advantage of the grief, the surprise, and I think the intensity of trying to clear out so much stuff that was ahead of us. It was just a perfect storm, I think.
I think that's really a good way of describing what you're really kind of convey to the audience here. It was the perfect storm, everything when you walked into that property. Now, I have to ask as well, you mentioned he was an anthropologist, and that intrigues me. And you also mentioned like he was interested in the Mayans, stuff like that. He went all around the world. Now, either Chris or Anita, when you were packing the stuff up, when you were cleaning up, did you come across any kind of antiques, any artifacts that really kind of stood out a bit out of place, a bit weird, anything like that?
Well, it's just
a couple artifacts, and that's just that's the tip of the iceberg.
I have hundreds of boxes of things that he packed away. There's Native American. I mean, it's
every culture.
Every culture. There's more. I mean,
there's Greek, there's Egyptian, there's Roman. I mean, it's every culture you can imagine. Because he's being an anthropologist, so he had every for all his shows he did.
Medieval,
and he had all kinds of stuff. So I mean, but you have all the boxes.
Well, the one thing that when we had a group come to our house, we had a good. She became a good friend. She and her investigative team came in. It was January of 2010. That's right, because we had been at his house till the end of October 2009. Closed the door on that place after we sold it. We had completely cleared out, and then we had contractors come in that were going to finish the job, like remove cabinets and other types of things. But in the meantime, Kevin, we had packed away so many hundreds of boxes that were in my basement because my basement was pretty empty, and I didn't want to spend a lot of money on a storage unit. And I thought, well, I'll just put it in my basement and it'll give me a chance to go through things when I have the time, because right now we're under a time crunch to get all this stuff out of here because we need to get it. The contractors want to come in and redo the house. But one object that one of the investigators, when they came here, they had brought their meters with them, and they were going through some boxes, and one item, which is from I guess it's Peru. I guess Peruvian Mummy Doll. Yeah, the Peruvian Mummy Doll.
That was a big item.
Yeah, that was that had been wrapped up, and she said, "What's making my meter jump over here?" So we unwrapped some of the tissue paper, and there was this doll made out of fabric, and it was definitely handmade. And I saw a tag on it that he had written. It said Peruvian Mummy Doll, and poor Laurie, who was the investigator, she said, "Oh, that's just great. You know, it's a mummy doll." I said, "Well, I don't really know much about this because he never shared this with me, but I knew he was in South America." And later on, when I researched, because she was getting really high spikes from this particular object, it's by the Chicharo Indians, the descendants of the more ancient Indians in Peru. It dates where they made these dolls out of fiber and rags, but the actual clothing is from mummy wrappings from ancient, Peruvian Indians. And what happened was many of these mummies had been unearthed through the last 100 years, some of them just by erosion, and the fabrics would be left out in the open. And of course you had grave robbers coming in, I guess, looking for, goods they could sell. But a lot of the fabrics and textiles were not of interest to any of the grave robbers. So they were leaving these things in heaps in the desert. And these Indians found the fabrics and started would make the clothing for these particular souvenir dolls, and they would sell them to the tourists in the 1950s. And I know my friend, he was in Peru in the 70s. So this doll dates from the 1950s. It was actually made, but the textiles are at least 500, 600 years old or even more. So no wonder it was getting a spike, because this did not come from, a really great background, that this is something that belonged.
Not only that, but you also had the fragments.
Yeah.
Stone fragments.
Yeah.
I don't know why stone pieces will be given off any kind of a reading, but they were just stone shards in a box that you had.
Yeah, it's pottery shards.
Yeah, they were giving off all kinds of readings along, even more so like parallel with the Mummy Doll.
Yeah.
The Mummy Doll a lot more though. I mean, that thing was like hitting the top of the charts.
Yeah, that was. And
if I go back to that, sorry, Anita, if I go back to that with Chris there, I'm taking notes here, and that's one of the things I'd noted down. If you look at the Peruvian Mummy Doll and then these kind of stone shards, I mean, neither of these should be given any electromagnetic frequency off. And yet, these EMF meters, I'm sure people out there have watched all of the kind of, maybe they haven't, the paranormal shows, but this is one of the devices that really can be used to pick up when something's going on. And like I say, I mean, there should be nothing coming off objects like that. However, that's very indicative of something otherworldly, something supernatural going on right away. Now, before you took all of this stuff to the house, was there anything in your own property that had given you cause for concern? Anything that you thought there might be some kind of haunting, some poltergeist activity there beforehand?
Well, we've been here since 1986, and we know we were on an older property, but didn't know the logistics, what exactly was on the property. And more research that we've done in the area, we're in outside Philadelphia, and the area we live in the suburbs were settled by Welsh Quakers in the late 1600s, early 1700s. And apparently, what we've now found out, but we've never felt that our house had any real strange things going on, even though now we look back, I think Christopher had a imaginary friend that we think now was not really imaginary, but we just didn't think in those terms of anything that was, like spooky or creepy in the house. Because, in fact, my friend's mom came to my house one time and she said, Nita's house is a real home. It's such an inviting, warm feeling when I come in. And my home is my refuge. It's a mini art gallery because I'm an artist. My dad was an artist. Chris is an artist. And I also travel out west, have a lot of Native American artifacts. But my home is my sanctuary. And it was never anything that thought, oh, this is something in here that's dangerous or creepy. But then when we brought these objects into the house, the paranormal team that came in that January that did some of the meter testing, as soon as she walked in the door, she goes, something's already been here. There's something here already. I looked at her, I said, what are you talking about? She goes, oh, there's, as soon as I walked in your property, she said, you don't know this background? I said, I'll have to look up in the Historical Society. I said, I was too busy as a single parent raising my son. Like, I didn't think, like, you're so much in the moment of trying to make ends meet and not have much time to do any investigation. But we always dug up in our backyard when I was planting tulip bulbs or doing some landscaping. We'd find shards of pottery, some porcelain pieces. Chris found a silver-plated spoon. We've even now found a part of an old clay pipe which is like really early 1800s. We now found out that our property, we're actually in the foundation of an old farmhouse, and our basement, we have an older fireplace, and the fireplace has bricks still made up of the fireplace that dates from the 1800s. So they didn't bother putting a new foundation. That when the gentleman bought the property in 1947 and built our Cape Cod house on the property, they just used the same layout, I guess, as the farmhouse was, because the sunken basement is really the oldest part of the house and the property. And then they built in 1947, they built the house on top. And eventually, apparently, which I talked to a neighbor who knew this area, he said in 1922, Anita, he said there was no house on your property. It was just a foundation, and that was left from the 1800s. And he showed me a map, and there was nothing dedicated as a landmark as far as a structure. But he said, Mr. Roberts, who lived, after this property he bought, he said he just put the house on top of. They didn't have to dig out really much of a basement; it was already there. So we're actually on top of really old property. And Bill Bean picked up that.
Yeah, I find that interesting because I'm not saying I can say definitively, but it's almost as if when you get these old properties, and in particular the old stonework, for some reason it's as if almost the stone can record past events. They call it like residual energies, stuff like that. And I find that really interesting as well, because it even comes across, speaking to you both, that you have a really close relationship, and it's not a stretch of the imagination for me at all to really put myself in that warm, kind of really loving household. And if it was a family that lived there originally, perhaps it was just almost like they were the same kind of energies. And maybe that's why it wasn't so obvious until that is you started mixing it with other ooga boogas, as I like to call them sometimes, from other time periods, other locations around the world. So yeah, I think this kind of property that you were on initially, I think they were quite maybe at rest, at peace, because of the love and energy that you were providing there.
Well, that's actually the way I start out my second book, which is our experiences in my own home after we closed a chapter at my friend's property. And what it pretty much comes down to is whatever was dormant here was activated by, we call them the trespassers, after we brought the things from my friend's his property to here, which, whatever we had collected, and through the years that I've been here, raising my son, there wasn't a lot of outside influence or outside things that you were buying, but by bringing this massive amount of objects, and I'm telling you, my basement is full, and I also have a shed that's full, and even though we've tried to sell some of the things, but it was just so much.
We are right on the break, and I knew this. So we will be right back. Don't go anywhere. Nope.
This is the Kev Baker Show.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Kev Baker, and tonight's special guests are Anita and Chris Intenzo, all the way from the USA. Good friends of our good friend Bill Bean, and we are getting into a show that I am calling The Haunting. Now, guys, I want to get right back into this. And during the break, Anita, you were kind of laying out in more detail some of the history of the actual property that you were living on before things got really stirred up and the paranormal activity went off the charts. And rich in history, you were mentioning to me the Welsh Quakers, stuff like that. So if we could just go over that, and then we'll get deeper into all of these dark forces and the supernatural.
Okay, well, what I was mentioning to you, Kev, is the property that we are on now is been several hundred years of having occupation. The Welsh Quakers came in the late 1600s, early 1700s, and the property, it was owned by one family, the Lewis family, and then in the 1800s, it switched over to the Stanton family, and they were pretty much the dominant family. Was a farm community until the 1900s, and then 1922, on some maps that I saw from a neighbor who is into historical things. In fact, I'm connected with a historical society. It was just a fallow area. There was just a foundation here. And then 1947, the man that we bought the house from in 1986, he had built our current house on top of the property, and it's actually on the foundation of the Stanton family farm. And we find, bits of pottery, we find some things, remnants of occupation here, and probably even before the Welsh Quakers are the American Indian element, the Lenape Indians, who are native to this area of Pennsylvania and are the Indians that dealt with William Penn in the 1680s, when he came here. And so there's been always an occupation in the area because this was always farmland. Now, of course, it's quite built up, but we have the last bit of property that was part of the farm. We have maybe a half an acre left where our house is situated. And when Bill Bean came to the house in 2011, he said to us, there's been a lot of living and dying on this property. And he really didn't know that much of the history or didn't realize how long that this property had been in occupation. So he picked up on a lot of, maybe occupants, people that had been here. And something that you mentioned to me about a kind or a family that related to us, we actually have a resident female ghost that we affectionately call her Marjorie. She's appeared to Chris in a dream. She was a caretaker to young children that lived on this property in the 1800s. And she, I feel, connected with me because I was a caregiver to both my parents before they passed away. And she leaves me, if you could believe this, one of my people that I've been on a show a couple of years ago called them apports, A-P-O-R-T-S, I think, apports.
Yeah, it's like objects that kind of appear, right?
Appear, yes. She actually makes me knitted pieces of textile that I'll find on my rug and was not there a few minutes ago. I have over a dozen or more pieces that are made out of a certain type of thread. I call them the ghostly threads or gifts, ghostly gifts. She started these. I didn't know who was giving these to me, but since we've had the investigators here quite a few times, it's always the same people because we don't want to open up our house as a entertainment venue. We've always had just the same investigators come here so they can keep sort of a record when they've been here and how things have changed or what they discover when they've been here. But they were blown away when I showed them. I said, it actually happened that Christopher was on a TV table. He had some of his paints because Chris is a model builder and model painter. He had some of his art tools on a table, and I sit next to the table watching TV, and I found these blue silky threads that he said to me, he said, I just found these, Mom, on top of my paints. And he said, do they belong to you? Because he knows I would sit at the chair sometimes, and I do a lot of hand sewing for antique doll costuming. I do a lot of that on the side. And I said, no, I don't even recognize that color, or they're really silky looking. I don't even recognize that type of thread. And for some reason, I did not throw them out. They were just kind of clumped together, just long strands and joined at like a little bit of on the end. And I put them on my coffee table in the living room. And I said, I'm just going to leave them there. The next morning when I came down, and as God is my witness, the pieces had been woven into a chain link type of, it almost looked like tatting or like lace work. And I was stunned. I was absolutely stunned. I go, I can't believe these were just threads and now they're made into something. So I immediately showed them to Chris. I said, you remember those blue threads? I said, look what happened to them overnight. So that made me quite aware that I have to be on the lookout. And maybe who's ever trying to tell me is, if you see threads, don't throw them out, because that's my way of communicating with you. So I put them away and started documenting the time or the date when I found that. Then weeks after, I started finding more, and they were actually all made, woven, and I would find them on the living room rug, going up to the steps. I was sweeping steps one day with my little sweeper, and it was right in front of me. I go, oh, I'm so glad I didn't sweep that up. It's right on the step in front of me. It's like they were appearing so I could find them.
But not only in the house.
Yes.
They've been on you.
They've been on me.
When we wanted a supermarket where we're walking, and then it's just stuck on her back. Like, here you go. Like, she must have left this for you. Like, like that. Like, don't lose this. But it's not only in the house. It's been other stuff. It's been on me.
Yes.
Where I've been upstairs brushing my teeth in the bathroom, and I'll have one on my in my shirt.
Yeah.
And I'll just like a tucked in my collar. Like, keep that there for safekeeping and give that to your mom. Where I've been over at the store, and we find stuff over there.
Oh, we have quite a collection. All different colors. All different
very
sizes.
Elaborate.
Yes.
Some of them are very elaborate. Some are very just like benign. But how about that really long
that
one?
was given to me on my birthday. I have a birthday in August, and I went outside my breezeway door, and there's this black, long chain link. It's over a foot long, and it was right outside the door. I said, who left this? I'm thinking, did this like somebody come out of a car? Did this come? And the more I looked at it, I go, no, this is a woven thing that was left to me.
And it was linked like what chain would be.
Yes.
Like a very long, thick chain, but in fabric.
In fabric, yes.
Instead of being in metal chain. And it was crazy. Unbelievably crazy.
Yeah.
I'm loving this. I really am. And, it just shows you, myself included, everyone out there, you say the word haunting, and right away, straight off the bat, we imagine something dark, something evil, something creepy going on. But that's because we've been programmed to think that way through books and through Hollywood and the programs and stuff like that. But hauntings don't have to be anything that are, necessarily bad in any respect, do they?
No, Kev, I think we have seen a real balance between the good and the dark. I mean, we definitely know that we have a kind presence it's been in our house, and we believe that we also have my deceased friend. He came to me in a dream a couple of years ago, and he apologized to me for leaving so much for me to take care of. That, he died suddenly. He didn't even have a chance to go through and label things that he wanted to. There was so much left undone that he wanted to do. And, but he said he would always protect me. And I've told Bill that I know that we live in a house that has really unusual activity. It's quieted down. It was very, very active right after my friend's house was settled, and we started having activity here, even to the point where you have coins materialize from nowhere and being thrown against the wall. We would have things broken, I've been scratched. I've had some major scratches on me. That's when Bill's really been like ASAP has gotten to us, because he knows something has breached the veil, and now they're really coming after me.
Let me ask you then, Anita, because this is where I want to really go now, because we got to the point where you brought the stuff back to the house. Mm-hmm. How did things change from that point on? Was it gradual? What really led you to bringing in supernatural kind of investigators, and what led you to Bill Bain?
Well, we had left my friend's place in October. November and December, we were just relaxing because we had put in almost a year my friend's house. On Christmas Eve 2009, out of the blue, we started having poltergeist activity. Something hit against my front door. We were having breakfast, and Chris said, I don't know what just happened. And we went to the front door, and there was a mat knife that I have sitting on top of a microwave in my kitchen, and it was against the door. And I said, oh no, like, where did this come from? Like, why did this happen? Then we're trying to get things done because it's Christmas Eve. We're trying to wrap presents. We're going to go over to my parents for the Italian 7-fish dinner that we always have. And that was not on our mind as like, we're going to have a haunting start, but things did happen. Chris went into the bathroom to shave, and no sooner as he went into the door, I was in my room, and I happened to be looking at the hallway, and I saw a dark shadow dart after him into the bathroom and threw his electric shaver right against the wall. And things were just happening all of a sudden. And I was so upset because I said, oh no, not here. Like, things have been fine for like 2 months. And now we're getting the same type of thing that was happening at my friend's house. Because my friend's house constantly, we were so attuned because we were there for so long. We knew when something, like, we were just going about our business and packing objects, and we'd hear something being thrown against the wall, and it would be paper clips, pens, nail files, you name it. He had so much stuff in the house that things were just, let's see what we could throw around today and get them all, discombobulated and not knowing what's going on. And it would constantly distract us from what we were supposed to do, was empty out the house. But coming back to my house, Christmas Eve was the turning point where we realized something's going on in our house now. First inkling was, Chris says to me, well, if they're going to throw around junk, why don't they at least throw gold coins or something? Hey, if you can materialize anything, let's make it worth our...
Throw money at me if you're going to throw something.
Throw money. And within a few minutes, we hear this huge clang against the tile wall in the bathroom upstairs. And I see something gold on the floor. And Chris said, don't tell me. And I picked it up, and here it was, a token, a car wash token from the 1970s or 60s, because it didn't have an area code that we use now in the United States, and it was gold colored. And so we said, well, nice try, but it's not real gold. Like you're throwing stuff against the wall.
Yeah, there's no value on it.
There's no value.
On the back it says no cash value.
But it's like, that's the weird thing. That just because they understood what we said and they answered us, so we knew it was intelligent. But when his shaver was thrown outside of broke a shaver, I was going to start picking up pieces. I looked down the steps and I see black shadows dancing all the way down. And I called out to my deceased friend. I said, Paul, oh no, it's like they're starting here. Please help us. It's Christmas Eve. I don't want to deal with this anymore. And everything just stopped. It just became silent, and we went about our business. We just picked ourselves up. We tried to shake off.
We left pretty quickly.
We left. Yeah, we got dressed and went over to my parents and tried to say, well, maybe this is just happening just now. But that was the start of things escalating. New Year's Eve, or right after New Year's, we had about when we had the power outage in just our house. On our whole block, everybody's lights were on, but ours, it would just happen. I'm on the telephone with a friend, and all of a sudden, all the lights go out. And I got spooked. And she said, what's going on? I said, all our lights just went out. And we looked out the window, and everybody else's lights were on. And I said, it looks like we're the only house that's dark. So we're thinking, let's call the electric company. We just left a message to say, we're having an outage. But after, in the dark, things started getting thrown against the wall. And Christopher was upstairs. Actually, he had been in the middle of taking a shower, and the lights went off, and he's calling down like, what happened? Everything's dark. I said, Chris, get down here. Things are happening down here. Things are getting thrown. So he comes down as quick as he can with his cell phone light on, and within the next couple hours, we were terrified. We were going through the house with a flashlight, and things were getting thrown in back of us. Objects were being moved. We had a gold paper mache reindeer that was in front of our fireplace. Next thing you know, the thing is sitting on a chair. So I go, who just moved that? And we're like huddling together, holding on to each other.
We couldn't stay in one room because we'd be hearing noises. We'd be hearing all kinds of stuff. Things would be getting thrown at you. Basically, you'd want to get out of that room. Go to the next room.
How about the stuffed animal at the head of the stairs?
Stuffed Winnie the Pooh. laying down crouched at the top of the stairs when we were looking upstairs because we heard a bang.
Yeah,
and the thing's looking down. Like, most frightening thing you'll ever see that's not frightening because it's a cute and cuddly Winnie the Pooh.
Winnie the Pooh. It was for a cousin that he's going to give for a present.
Hey, that's like when I watch horror movies. It's usually little objects like that, cuddly, normally innocent, turn really, really sinister.
Yeah, we can laugh about it now, but we're terrified.
Like he said,
here you're not able to see the hand in front of your face, and you're hearing growls, you're hearing noises, you're hearing all kinds of stuff.
Hang on, hang on. Just let me pause you there. This is so weird because one of the questions I'd been writing down here was there any kind of physical noises? Because I watch a lot of these shows, and in some of the more kind of active locations, it sounds like almost just disembodied growls, almost human. Is that the kind of thing that you're talking about here?
Yeah,
yes.
And we get it all the time, till right up till now. If that was back in
2010, that was at our house.
No, that was still 2009. Well, that was 2010 with the power outage. That was still technically 2009. Was the end of the year because it was New Year's. New Year's Eve going into the holidays because it started right like 2 months after we closed the house, so it was still like 2009. But like right up to from then till now, I mean, we're still hearing because with Bill just here recently, we got
Bill heard the growl. Yeah, he heard the growl down the basement.
But you hear all kinds of stuff.
Yep,
with that.
Well, we also have heard children's laughter. We had a psychic medium who was a good friend of a friend, and he called us and he said, "Would you mind? I'm visiting family, but I'd like to stop at your house. Don't tell me anything more." He said, "I was just informed, that you have some kind of strange thing going on." But he said, "Let's like to pick up some of my own vibes and see." We knew who he was. He had called us and said he'd like to just walk through the house. And immediately he walked through the house. He said, "You had children that died in this house." And I said, "Well, that goes for the children that we hear running through the house, that they bump into the staircase, or I hear them sliding down the banister at 3 o'clock in the morning." And he said, "Yeah, they're young children. They didn't know they passed away suddenly." And we also have been informed possibly in our backyard there might be a grave or two of these children that were buried because our area is zoned country. We're not the city. And back 200 years ago, you could bury on your own property if you weren't part of a church or wanted to put them in a graveyard. So we've had grave dousers here who went to a location that we did not tell them where we thought there was a grave. And individually, 3 members of the team each took a turn without seeing where the other person was going. And at the end of them going around the backyard, they all came to the same spot when they compared notes. And that's where Chris had said to me before, he said, "That's the spot that they're going to say there's a grave there." And that's where they all said there's a grave. So we don't want to dig it up. We're not sure about this, but it would make sense because there are children that we've heard, or they are very mischievous. They leave fingerprints on my glass coffee table. And that's how I got to know Bill Bean, because we had not seen this before. It was 2013 or 2000, it was at least 5-6 years ago. I saw these handprints and finger marks on my glass coffee table. And I did my CSI, like I'm a big, detective. I sprinkled talcum powder to see if it would absorb and see if I could see the outline. And boy, did it show these outlines of fingerprints on top of fingerprints. And that's the pictures I took and put them out on Facebook. And a girl got in touch with me in Tennessee and said to me, "I know someone who lives not far from you, and I'm going to give you his name and phone number, but I'm going to get in touch with him before that, and I'll have him give you a call if you give me your permission that he can call you." But first he emailed me, Bill, and then he said, "I'm going to call you, Anita." And he talked to us, and I said, I have a story to tell you, Bill. So that's how we met him. He came up from Maryland, which was a 2-hour drive, complete stranger to us. But as soon as he walked in the door, he was outside for a few minutes. And he said, "As soon as I pulled up in your driveway, I could feel the energy. You've got something definitely here." And he walked in the door and met us, and we felt very comfortable with him, that he was like a long lost friend. And the rest is history, that Bill's been part of our lives now for at least 5-6 years, that he's been helping us and coming to our home, trying to single out, like, what exactly are we're not dealing with just any one thing. There's many layers of different activity that seems to be connected with the objects because they're from different cultures. plus what we have on the property. And it's a smorgasbord. It's just, it's whatever you can make out. We have so many different instances of unusual things that have happened that you can't make this stuff up, Kevin. I'm not that good with imagination.
And, Bill was somebody I came into contact with through another guest that worked with paranormal circles. It was Laura Maxwell. She'd done deliverances. And she said to me, I think you'd get on really well with Bill Bean. He'd be a great fit for the show. And this was long before I had ever had my brush with the paranormal and the darker side of it. And I'm so, so grateful that I had Bill to call upon. And as soon as I was in trouble with what we had been getting up to up north in Scotland, we'd gone to Alistair Crowley's house. And unbeknown to me, at the time, his ashes are actually scattered on the property.
Wow.
And I definitely took some energy home with me. There was 3 of us there. My partner, she came to the property. She stood there for about 2 minutes and had to get away. Really energetic. And then for months after that, the 3 of us, my brother, his friend, the bad luck that we all went through, the ill health that I fell into as well, it was beyond coincidence. It really was. And I'm so grateful, for whatever reason. It's almost as if I was meant to come into contact with Bill for what was to come down the line. So I can definitely, hand on heart say that I know what Bill does is very, very powerful. And you too. I mean, I think all 3 of us would agree, one of the greatest people we've ever met. And the fact that Bill felt all of that the minute he turned up on your property is yet more confirmation for me. Not that I doubt anything you're saying at all, Anita Chris, but he seems to be very, very in tune with this. And when you look at Bill's life story, it's almost as if he was from the time he was born, where he grew up. It was his preparation for helping people like us today.
That is absolutely correct, because he's been through so many trials, but everything he's confided in us, that he said, if any other circumstances, I should either be in jail or dead, because of how much hardship and things that he could have been led astray. But because he found his faith and the path that he chose, which was the right path, then he's become now such an example to other people who are going through, terrible, instances. Sometimes, it's not through any making of their own. It's just where you're born or how you're in contact with people. You can't change. You can pick your friends, but you can't pick your family. So sometimes you're in things that you have no rights to be able to change things. But Bill, he knows what he talks about. He lived his problems, and everything he's done now, he can empathize and understand what other people have gone through because he's lived it himself. And that is what makes him so special. He's a minister, but he lives his ministry every single day. It's not just something people put away and then they just do a lecture or a sermon on Sunday. Bill, every single day, he's a spiritual warrior, because the times we're going through now, you have to be very aware and very vigilant, because of the dark forces and the things that we've been up against, the dark forces that are related to some of the objects that we brought into the house. They're definitely, because of their background and the attachment to some really, really evil, philosophies, that's exactly what we've been up against. Christopher is really, he's developed a mediumship. When he's asleep, he has different people that are deceased that come to him and give him messages. And one particular thing which strays away a little bit from just artifacts, things that are of just of a certain culture, Native American, but what really surprised us, the turn it took that dealt with World War II. My friend's family were from Germany, and as we were clearing out the house, we came across evidence that my friend's father was a Nazi SS officer. And we had never known, I knew his family and never dreamed that this could have been his background, but it was kept hidden from everybody. And by me going into the house and taking care of all the things, I unearthed papers, and a booklet that were evidence that he had been in the military and he had been in the Nazi group, a special group. And even though a lot of things were given to everything was given to the family, but I did not know what those were going to be till later, even though I documented some things when I found them, but everything was given to the family. I came across later on other papers, things stamped with a Nazi swastika. But one thing Chris unearthed was the black book that you found. Why don't you tell Kevin how you found it, honey?
I think it was just, we were just clearing out stuff, and there was the
bedroom.
There was the it was kind of like a bubble in the rug.
Yeah.
Where there was like a spot. And then not really knowing there was like the hard spot, and then we pulled up the rug, and then there was a book that you had found, or that I had found when we went through it and see what was. I forget what was all in there, but it was because we had given it to the family or whatever. But I wish we'd scanned some of the pages or something, but I don't know if we were going to be able to do that or not. But
we're almost on the break right now, and I don't want to get cut off because this is really getting to a really interesting part here. But something I want the listeners to be really aware of, and I'm sure a lot of the audience are well versed in this, but maybe we've got first-time listeners. I love to think we've always got first-time listeners. And one of the kind of lesser things that's, in my opinion, lesser things anyway, known about the Nazis, especially the SS, was the fact that they were very, very steeped in occult teachings. And they were definitely dabbling in the darker side of things, away from all the heinous crimes that have been reported over the years. They were literally calling upon and taking advice from things beyond the veil. So this is going to be a good place to pick it up after the break. Johnny Whistles, my co-host, he's in the chat room. He'll be joining us in hour number 2. And we've got 1 hour to go here. This is fine.
This is the Kev Baker Show.
Our special guests tonight as we move into hour number 2 on the Kev Baker Show are Anita and Chris Intenzo, all the way from the USA. And we are talking about what I was calling dark forces, but as we've learned more about the story, let's call it paranormal, supernatural activity. Because, we found out that there's not always a bad side to the supernatural. And then just before the break, something kind of strange happened. And I'm sure for the listening audience out there, you'd have picked up on this too, because there's no filters. We don't edit anything out. And you hear what I hear. And just as Chris started to talk about this Nazi aspect of things, the Black Book, it was almost as if, and I heard Chris stopping, and I thought that his mum, Anita, had been saying something to him. And then Chris started speaking again. And then as we went to the break, I could pick up on the fact that there was something going on around Chris and Anita. They were talking about something. And Chris, I'll let you explain to the audience just what happened as we were going towards the break there. And in particular, when we started talking about this darker Nazi kind of aspect to the story.
Yeah, it was, nothing is beyond belief over here. But right when we started talking about that she started talking about the Nazi aspect, and when she passed over to me to talk about the black book that I had found, I had heard what sounded like a disembodied either voice, like sighing, or I don't know if it was a mixture like of a sigh and a growl, but it lasted about maybe 2 or 3 seconds, and just as that happened, it made me kind of like pause because I was half trying to like listen to what it was, and I had stopped, and I completely lost my train of thought of what I was even starting to say. So I kind of like stumbled over my words and was like half talking, and then I was like I couldn't believe that I had had heard something right behind me. But like I say, nothing is nothing is beyond belief over here. So, but then
that's very strange.
When we were talking about the other thing too, with the fingerprints that. We felt like there was something in the bathroom behind us. I mean, we don't know what us talking about stuff is stirring up stuff, but like, hey, there you go. It's we're talking about the haunting stuff, so
And it's quite strange because I'm not sure if at the exact same time as you were seeing this shadow when we were halfway through that segment, but for the first time during the show, I got the goosebumps and the hairs on my arms stood up on end. And then just as we were going to the break, what happened from my point of view was I heard a sigh, and it was not so much of a kind of annoyed sigh or anything, but I thought your mum was maybe trying to get your attention, maybe trying to remind you about something. But obviously then as we went into the break, it became clear that there was something else going on, and Anne can certainly pay witness to the fact that the hairs on my arms were absolutely rigid, standing on end. So I think when we've touched on this topic, we've really stirred something up. Now, I've got Johnny Whistles here with me as well. Johnny, I'm not sure if you can still hear me or not. Johnny Whistles, are you there?
Yes, I am, Kev.
Don't worry, Anita. You'll soon find out why we call him Johnny Whistles. Won't we, Johnny?
Yeah, you will. Every time I say my S's, we have 1,000 cats and dogs going crazy somewhere.
Now, Johnny, you've been listening to the show so far. This is the kind of topic that even if we didn't have the show here on TFR, this is the kind of thing we would probably get into over a cup of coffee. We really like this kind of paranormal stuff. But your thoughts on this so far, dude?
Well, as I was saying just at the break, Kev, some of the things that these two have went through are pretty horrific, to be honest with you. Some of them are quite frightening. And for things to, like, appear from nowhere and then hit a wall, I mean, that itself is just... Thank God it's not me. I don't know what it is. Maybe are used to just able to see this, or do you think that it's, do you know what I mean, something else? It's just one of these things that's happening to you. It's not that everybody else can't see it. You can. It's just one of these things that's happening to you.
These are real, Johnny. This is physical objects. Absolutely.
Oh, God.
As an example, before I go back to Chris and Anita, when I was up at Boleskine House, Crowley's home, between myself and my brother, we were stood up against one wall, and his friend Greg, he was stood just beside us, nobody else in the room. And out of nowhere, it would appear, a stone, nothing big, nothing drastic, but just a little stone flew across the room right in between myself and my brother. And what we call that is an apport. And if you watch some of the paranormal shows, this is actually quite a common occurrence. Can I explain where these things come from? No. But to Johnny's question there, is it just the experiencer that can see this? Absolutely not. These are real physical objects that do appear from time to time. And again, I can't explain where they come from, why this happens, but it's certainly evidence of otherworldly stuff going on. Now, Chris, before we get back into the Nazi stuff, let's totally shift gears for a moment, okay? But let's make sure we don't annoy too many of the forces that are still in your property there. And you were sharing with me before the show that away from all of this stuff, you've got your own store with your mum. We heard earlier on your mum had mentioned that you're into painting models, stuff like that. So tell us quickly about your store. Have a good plug of your website, and you're into kind of the, let's call it the Dungeons and Dragons, the role-playing, the Warhammer kind of stuff, right?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, we do a lot of the tabletop miniature gaming at the store, have different tournaments, we have different gaming days, we have a painting table to where the hobbyists can come in, they can work on stuff, they could talk shop, we put on different movies that will play on the TV over there. We'll have music on, different stuff relating to maybe what we're doing for the day. We do also, besides the miniatures, we also do the Funko Pops, like the bobblehead collectibles, and we'll maybe do a movie or something that day on the television relating to the movie Pop that came out that day. When the Die Hard Pops came out, we did the whole Die Hard the whole Die Hard marathon. So everybody was coming, they were watching that. They're like, "Oh man, you got Die Hard movies? I'm not even gonna leave. I'll buy some stuff and I'll pull up a chair and I'll watch." And so that's like we have a nice kind of like little homey feel with the store to where people can come in and they can hang out for a while if they want, watch a movie, work on some stuff, talk to me, be like, "Hey, what's coming down the pike? What do you think's cool in the gaming? Kind of some tips on how to build my army." So we're kind of like a one-stop shop to where we can give everybody what they need. We have a lot of the supplies, and we have a lot of everything going on over there.
What's the website for that, Chris? So
our website is www.etrminimen.com. The name of the store is Enter the Realm. We're in Springfield, Pennsylvania, in Delaware County over there. And you could also look up, there's 2 Facebook pages if you're interested in looking at, besides the website, the Enter the Realm Facebook page, which is the main store page, and that has everything up to date on the page of what we got going on at the store, for release days, event days, tournament days, you name it. And then we also have a Facebook page called Miniature Men, which is kind of our store gallery page to where I put up a lot of my painted samples that I work on at the painting table. And then I also feature if somebody would like their work shared on that page that they worked on that day, or maybe they brought something in and said, hey, this looks really cool. Would you mind throwing this up on the Facebook page, giving me a little bit of airtime? Be like, sure, we'll do that for you. So, but Miniature Men is more the gallery page, with Underground being the store page. So awesome. People can check that out.
Yeah, and if people are in the area, I urge them to go and check out the store, come and say hello to Anita and Chris as well. And there's another reason I brought that up, folks, and that is the fact that Anita touched on it earlier on. It could be very easy to go over stories like this, and then we find out that the people telling you the stories are selling tickets to come to their property to come and see some of this activity. But that isn't the case here. The business that they're working on, it's unrelated from any of the paranormal activity that we're really talking about here. And the reason I bring that up is, a lot of people, and I'm a skeptic sometimes as well, especially with all of the kind of things that we see on YouTube and things going on nowadays. I mean, there's no kind of, there's no need for Anita or Chris to be hyping things up. In fact, far from it. Running a business, talking about these kind of supernatural things that go on, some people still roll their eyes at it. And in fact, it could have a negative effect for people in their personal and business life. So that's why I was really keen, not only to help promote the stuff you get up to, Anita, at the store, but to show people that there's no kind of reason for you to be embellishing the stories, making things up. You're not making any profit from, there's no kind of incentive for you to lie about this.
No, thank you for bringing up that, Kevin. That's really appreciated, because even when I wrote my 2 books, I really had to ponder over the idea of am I really going to tell a truth, all the truth here, use my real name? And I changed names of even my friend because I wanted to protect the privacy of his family. But I had friends who distanced themselves from me after I was telling them I was writing a book, and, that I was getting some traction from, agents. People were looking into publish the book, but I did it mostly the book was written as a what do they call it? Cathartic? I can't even say the word now. Cathartic type of therapy for me, because I almost couldn't believe.
Well, you want to educate people on topic. Yes, you don't really want. We weren't doing it to we're not going to sell books. Obviously that's a bonus. You're selling books. Yeah. But she wanted to get her story out there, tell what would happen. And we're not selling tickets like a haunted house for Halloween over here either.
No.
We want to tell people, educate people what's going on. So if something happens to you, then maybe you can, exactly, you can kind of relate and share stories of being in the community and tell what's going on. And the same thing with our store. It's we have our own lives. We have a lot that we have to handle every day with the store. We're there working sometimes 50, 60 hours a week at the store. And we have a lot of stuff we want to do. We don't want to have to come home and have something thrown at us from across the room. And then it's that just ends the day on a sour note. It's just, that's what happens sometimes. But we're in the paranormal community, and we're also kind of not in the paranormal community. Yeah. We want to, like you said, educate.
Well, we don't live. Everybody. We don't live for the paranormal. The paranormal is just part of our lives, even though we don't really look for it. I'm an artist. I'm a teacher. I've written things before that were not even part of for a haunting book or anything. I had my own life. I've been an artist since I could pick up a pencil, and I come from a family of artists, and that was my main focus. Became a single parent, of raising my son, trying to just struggle through, trying to keep a house, a roof over our heads, making sure that he went to, the good neighborhood schools and staying in the community. And then the paranormal stuff, as Bill says, you don't go finding it, it finds you, because he said, you guys were not even thinking of this at all. When I went into my friend's house, my main thing, when I had to go to the hospital to claim his body, because that's what happened, my name was in his wallet. And they called me and they let me wait before I could go over to the hospital. And by the time I got there, he was already dead. And I went to the room to go identify him because they had to get a person to witness and sign off papers. But I told him, and I don't know if he heard me, of course, his spirit might have been gone, but I said to him, I'll take care of everything, Paul. don't worry. You left this in my hands, and I promise you, I'll take care of everything. And I did not know at that point when I went into his house what exactly that meant. But I kept my promise.
Like a Pandora's box.
Yes.
By the of it. And I think, Chris, if we can, should we maybe finish off the story about the Black Book and the Nazis, and we'll see if we can manage to get through it this time, because just take us back to that whole kind of incident where that started. You found it under a rug or something, right?
Yeah, so we were moving furniture and different things that were in the one bedroom, and as we were moving stuff out of the room, I noticed there was like this bulge that was in the middle to the end of the carpet, and I was like, "What is that?" I was like, "Is the floorboard coming up, or what? Is there something that maybe is stuck, or maybe is there some kind of maybe damage underneath the floor?" So I said to my mom, I said, "Do you think we should see what this is?" And she's like, "Yeah." I mean, she's like, if you can move that really heavy chest of drawers over there, and maybe catch the corner of it, maybe you could kind of pull up the carpet enough to see what's in the middle of the rug. And so I was like, all right, I hurt myself doing it, but it was like we were really curious, and I'm glad that we did, because I was able to where I didn't get the rug up fully, but I pulled it up the corner enough to get what's under there and kind of stick my hand and kind of crawl under it a little bit, and I find this book, this small book. So I didn't even know what it was, and I kind of just handed it to my mom. I said, "This is what was sticking out from making that bulge." I said, "But there also is a floorboard that that was kind of stuck to." So I gave that to her, and then she was kind of like paging through it, and she's like, "I think this is something maybe we should investigate further, but obviously it still has to go to the family because it's with the other important papers and everything." So we didn't know what really to make of it, and I guess we wish we should have maybe if we could have at that point. I mean, we were just so involved in our things. I thought maybe we should have scanned some of the pages, but my grandfather actually then told us what the book was.
Well, when Chris handed me the book, it had like a leather cover, but it was black, and it had gold embossed the Nazi swastika, and that's what I remember. And I said, "Chris, look at this. This is a Nazi book." And I opened it up, and I found the picture of my friend's father in a uniform. And then I don't read German, but I could surmise by looking at it. It had like dates in it, and also I could make out his marriage date with his wife's name and son's name. So it kind of what I found out it to be. It's called a Wehr pass, WEHR, and it's a kind of a military pass book for officers or enlisted people to go through one area through another with this book, because it also gave them their medical history if they were up to date with shots, I guess. But it actually gave them the ability to travel back and forth the different regions. And I didn't know until that. I mean, we didn't think much of it. We just knew that was something that should go into the family. Well, but I remember.
Can I ask, Chris, is there anything going on there right now with the shadows running? Because for no reason at all, I've got goosebumps again. And the Nazis.
Yeah, I did hear something when she was talking about it, so that's funny that you brought that up. So we'll see if anything happens while she's continuing over here. I'll let you know.
Nazis. I mean, we talk about the Nazis all the time, and I mean, they're a horrible group to talk about, right? But they're not really something that gives me the creeps. But just
we have a whole different thing over here because of the whole related with the artifacts and just stuff in the basement. We actually have what we were told is. We have that there's a few Nazi officers that are lingering around here. So that possibly could be what's maybe giving you some hairs on end or goosebump stuff that we're talking about and stuff. But we'll see if hopefully nothing too bad happens.
I do these shows all the time, Anita, and the only reason I bring it up, and the listeners will know, I've done over 1,000 shows. I never kind of interrupt the guest to say, "Well, I've got the creeps right now. Is anything?" So, sorry to interrupt you, Anita.
No, that's right. Well, what we've come to learn in my second book, it took me a while to pull some things together. I did some investigation work. I had contacted the National Archives in Washington because I wanted to find out more. If I actually had come across some pictures too that I gave to my friend's brother, but one picture stood out in my mind, and the brother was kind of nonchalant. Oh, I'm getting the chills when I'm talking about this. I handed him the photograph. It was a photograph of his father in a long coat with a officer's hat, and he has two other men that were in a lighter shade of coat. His was really dark, and they were in front of a building. And when I handed him, I said, "Oh, I found some military pictures and things that belong to you that were your father's." And when I handed him the picture, he goes, "Oh, well, yeah, that's a picture of my dad. He was in a special group during the war." And I didn't put two and two together at that point. All I knew was like, that's the kind of, it looks like it's pretty important. Like they're officers and they're wearing these long coats, because I'm remembering Stalag 17 from a movie of seeing, Nazi officers, what they wore, but I didn't say anything to him. Well, I did investigating, and it turns out his father was in the Kriegsmarine, which is the Navy of Germany. He was a petty officer, but his wife, my friend's mother, came from a royal background. Her great uncle was a baron in Germany. Her family was very well connected. Her father was a Burgermeister, which is a mayor in Germany. My friend wore a special kind of suit that I've only seen it on Christopher Plummer in The Sound of Music, the Baron von Trapp. In fact, my friend was actually good friends with Maria von Trapp too, which is a whole other another story, because I've got writings. I have letters from Maria von Trapp to my friend that they wrote back and forth before she died in the 1980s. But anyway, getting back to the Nazi connection, if his father actually came through in a session while we were at my friend's house, when we had the paranormal team come there before we were leaving, because we knew we couldn't leave the house the way it was because there was so much going on. What messages she got was, he was an officer and he was part of a special group, and they did things that he was not apologizing for, that I was only following orders. But what this carried over was what she felt in the house, that he was hiding from her and was not being honest. Like she was making connections with my friend's father at my friend's house. Here, when the same investigator went into the basement, and we have a picture of the basement, I'm sitting on a chair, and she and her other two team members were in the basement towards the back door of our basement. And they were picking up something, and she told me, "Anita, get out of the basement. You have to get out of here." And I go, "Okay, but like, I don't want to leave you guys down here." "No, you have to leave right this minute." So I didn't question. I went upstairs, and we had my son and another person was upstairs, and they said, "What's going on?" I said, "I don't know. She just told me to leave, that she wants, she's doing something down there." She and her team members came up about 10 minutes later. She was white as a sheet, and she had red marks on her neck. And she told me, she said, "I connected with his father in your basement. He tried to strangle me. He tried to come after me, and he was coming after you. That's why I told you better get upstairs." She said, "He wants to come after you, Anita." And I said, "Well, why? I never did anything to him." "Yeah, but you're exposing him. You wrote about this in your book, and now he's got it out for you, and he's not alone. There's other Nazi officers that have died, that have come, and they're attracted to his energy in the basement because he's not going anywhere." Because I said, "Well, don't you guys move him on?" "No, he's not going anywhere because he doesn't want to face the music. He knows what he's done, and he's not leaving, and he's staying in limbo," or whatever you want to call it. So what we didn't know at the time, Chris had dreams in June of 2010, and these were almost unrelated. Like, we had this weird thing happen with our team members, the team members that came here. Chris then he comes down one morning and he hands me a piece of paper, and he said, "There's this guy's name I got, and here's a date, and I don't know what this is." But I said, "Well, who is this person?" He worked with your friend's father. He worked with Paul's father. And I said, "Well, you mean like recently, like before he died?" "No, I don't know." He said, "He's told me he worked with his father." We find out, I put it aside, and I wasn't even thinking about, like, look this up. But his name was Martin Sandberger. And turns out, Chris says to me a week later, "Did you ever check on this man?" I said, "Chris, I don't know how to Google this. This was like 2010. I wasn't that big up on the computer." I said, "I don't know how to look up this, if this person even exists." Christopher looks up on a website, and the man had passed away only recently, that he came to Christopher. And he happened to be a Nazi officer who had just died was it March? March of 2010, because you had the exact date down. And also Chris had the number of 900, and the man had killed 900 disabled children in his whatever he did. It was in this whole thing that we were reading on the internet. And I said, Chris, I didn't know this. Who is this man? Chris said, well, he worked with his father. I said, yeah, but what do you mean he worked with him? So we were starting to get bits and pieces before I'm finding out more about his father, but they're coming, like, we're getting directed by deceased Nazi officers are coming to Christopher in dreams, and it's all in my second book, the different dates, and they're giving us clues, or they're connecting with us. And I said, there's got to be something to this. Like, why these certain people who just passed away, 96 years old, another one was like 94 years old, he said they just died. And I said, well, what are these people's, that we got the names, we got dates, and we had never heard of them before. I called the Simon Wiesenthal Center in California, and they verified. The director called me back and said, yes, these people just recently died. They're on our radar because they were Nazi officers and they were involved in the Holocaust, and they were really bad dudes, the guy tells me. And I said, okay, well then you're telling me these people exist, and my son's telling me, he's seen them, and now I'm writing this down. But we've had in the house interference in the German language while Chris is helping me write my second book. There was a chapter we're working on in my living room. Chris is dictating me notes, and I said to him, I will tell you different outline here for the next chapter. Just write this down on your notepad, on your laptop. I said, just put this down while I'm talking, and then I'll go back and refine and work on the chapter after. But just get these notes down for me as I'm reading them to you. He then went out that night, and he said, look, I'll send this email to you. Here's the chapter. I'm reading the chapter, and I waited till the next day. I said, do you know what you just sent me? He says, yeah, I sent you the notes that you dictated to me. I said, yeah, but you got to see what you gave me. Kevin, you have to see this in the book. It was gobbledygook in between what I was dictating, and they had another person was dictating over Chris's hands and writing in German, like, it's how fun die, and a name of my friend, the name of my friend's.
Well, we're on the break. We are on the break.
On the break. Oh my
God. I'm going to tell people something when we come back, and this just gets even stranger and even stranger, folks. So I don't know what's going on tonight. I am goosebumps from head to toe. I'm going to take a quick photograph of this just so I can show the people doing the break.
This is the Kev Baker Show.
Chris and Anita Intenzo are very special guests tonight in the Kev Baker Show, and I'm not too sure if you can call it standing in the face of tyranny, like the music suggests there, but we're certainly standing in the face of something. And of course, we've been getting into supernatural, paranormal activity, and the show took a really kind of strange twist when Chris brought up the fact that there was a Nazi aspect to this. Now, back before the end of the first break, I certainly heard something which I thought at the time was Chris's mum interrupting him, and Chris stopped and started again, almost as if he didn't know where he'd stopped and kind of lost his place. It was only during the break that I heard Chris and Anita talking about the fact that that was because they had heard almost a sigh, a disembodied voice, if you want to call it that. Now, as the show went on there, we got deeper into this Nazi stuff, and I rudely interrupted Anita because I was feeling kind of weird, and it never really get weirded out to the point where I get goosebumps or I feel I have to really stop the guest and ask if there's something going on there in the background. Now, totally separate from this, but connected because we met through Bill Bean. Bill isn't listening to the show. However, we're always in constant communication via Facebook, stuff like that. We literally are brothers, albeit digitally, and I hope one day we'll physically meet. However, he kind of told me there, something weird going on here, Kev. We had a power outage. And guess when it was? Right at the time when we would have been experiencing voices on the show. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that this is all absolutely connected. I can't do that. I don't have any scientific proof to do that. However, my gut tells me that it's not unrelated. And I've asked Bill to give Anita and Chris a phone call after the show, because I fear that maybe what we're talking about here, especially as we got into the darker side there and the Nazi stuff, that we came to find that Chris has even been contacted about during his sleep. He's coming up with names that tie in with individuals that have a very, very evil past related to the Nazi SS. So I fear we're stirring something up in that house right there tonight. And that's not impossible at all, because it's Bill Bean that informed me that Chris and Anita, he would like to bring them on the show one night, because it was one of the most interesting and harrowing kind of places he had been to. Very, very active. And for one of the first times in Bill's career of doing all of this kind of work, exorcisms, deliverances, house cleansings, he felt the urge to ask Chris to join him down in the basement while he was giving his rebuking and binding prayers, something that Bill goes through when he's cleaning out houses. Now, that led to several photographs being produced, which we've discussed on the show before. I have them on my website, I believe. If not, you'll be able to see them on the previous show that I done with Bill, Chris, and Anita. We're going to get back into that basement right now. But that basement, we believe, is the scene of a portal. And I wonder, Anita, if us talking about all of this tonight, and I would hate to think that I've done anything to stir up any kind of activity around you people over there, because I can tell these are absolutely amazing people. Couldn't be warmer, couldn't be more friendly. And I would hate to think that one of our shows here, us talking about this, is going to result in maybe an uptick in the kind of thing that led you to Bill in the first place. So I hope that isn't the case. I've told Bill to give you a phone. But let's go now to when Bill came to the house, because this is when it gets even, I hate to say more interesting, because you've had to live through this. I mean, interesting probably isn't the right word to use. But that basement, it's obviously somewhere where the veil is thin and where the activity seems to stem from, right?
Oh yes, Kev. It's been really the seat of a lot of activity. We have a photograph of a big sort of a white energy ball that is in a corner of the basement where I was sitting back in 2010. And ironically, when Bill came to the house years later, as he went down the steps, he went to that corner without us telling him that we had picked up anything on photographs. And he had said, there's a portal right here. And then I told him I said, we have a photograph that was taken and we had picked up a really big anomaly in that area. And he could feel different energy things near the original foundation of the fireplace. And when he was here, was it last month? He was here about a month, 6 weeks ago, I guess he was here.
Like right before the holidays.
Yeah, right before the holidays. Bill came.
It was a week before Thanksgiving.
Week before Thanksgiving,
yeah,
that's right. And he came and he went down the basement again, and we took some pictures. And Chris took pictures, but Bill finds that really problematic. He said this is really a very active area. He seals up what he can with his prayers and invocations, and what it does, it does it for a while. While Bill's here, things are kind of challenging him, but he puts them back in their place. And we certainly don't do anything after that to try to provoke or doing EVP sessions. We don't use any type of devices. We just go about our lives. And as we said before, we have a store. I have a graphic arts. I'm a freelance artist also. I mean, we're always busy with things, and the paranormal just kind of has to, you're on the periphery here. This is our lives, and if you want to interfere, I mean, we've got things to do. We can't drop everything and just be at your whim. And I think that's part of why we are able to get through with this. We do things with humor. We take it in stride, but every so often it'll be very, very serious. And when I've been physically attacked, then Bill has been up here, very, very quickly, because he knows that it's not a friendly spirit. It's something that is trying to reach across the veil. And when that physically attacks you, then it's trying to do something about possession or to really hurt you or really freak you out so you can't go on with your life. But they're I don't know, we're a challenge, I think, for them because, and Bill says we've got a really strong grounding of what we believe. And we just do our thing. And Bill does his part to keep things really at a really peaceful level. And
I've asked Bill, actually, and I've never really done anything like this before, but I've urged Bill to give you a quick phone call after the show.
Okay.
I don't know. It's I'm just weirded out. And like I say, I'm a bit concerned that maybe us doing this show might have stirred something up.
It really actually doesn't take very much for stuff to stir up because just today we were putting was the rest of the Christmas decorations away. And I had to go bring the tree down to the basement because we had the box. Then we put that in there, and then we put everything away. But I noticed when I brought the tree back down, I felt very uneasy in the basement, and especially where we took that picture near the heater, and that's probably up on your site that we were talking about last time. The reaction that I was getting while I was in the basement was like, don't look at the heater. And I don't know why that was in my, like, somebody was telling me, like, don't look in the direction of the heater or don't look that way. Like, just basically drop the tree where it has to go and go right back upstairs. Like, don't linger.
Yeah, I'm getting this feeling again. I don't know what it is. It's not you, Chris. Don't get me wrong.
It was like a very heaviness in my head when I went down there. It was like
almost as if because you're talking about the location where it might be.
Yeah.
Johnny,
it was basically like almost a good force telling me like you don't need to be down here, like put the tree where it has to go and go right back up, like don't linger anything else that you have to. So like I listened and like, but it was like a heaviness, almost like if you were having like a pressure headache. It was weird, and then it went almost immediately away when I came back up and we went about our business today.
Well, I'll tell you what, this is strange, and Johnny, I know you've got a question for Chris and Anita here, but the last time I felt these kind of creepy, kind of goosebumpy feelings, Johnny, was when I was at Aleister Crowley's. And that's why I've urged Bill maybe to give a phone call to Chris and Anita. So, Johnny, I know you've got something to throw in here, right?
Yeah, Kev, it was I was watching a documentary on one of the Discovery channels, and it was the first time that I'd actually seen this. And it was the Nazis at their concentration camps were using ley lines. Now, these ley lines ran along, and the most important buildings in the concentration camps were right along the ley line, and at the very end was where they actually killed everybody.
Bill, why don't you get the phone?
Yeah, I was just wondering if maybe this basement, have you ever checked if the basement is maybe running on a ley line as well?
Anita, do you know if there's any ley lines in your area at all?
How are you?
What was that? Oh, I'm sorry. We got Chris.
We're doing okay.
We had a phone call that Chris he just took the phone. I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you said.
Okay. Johnny was talking about a documentary he had seen where it was actually talking about the Nazis and ley lines. And of course, ley lines are like natural kind of energetic lines on the planet. Any idea if there's any ley lines in your area? Because when you find paranormal activity like this, sometimes they can be connected. And with this Nazi thing going on as well, I wonder if there's a ley line running right through that basement of yours.
Probably the underground tunnel.
You want to grab that? Yeah, let me.
I'll talk to Kevin.
Talk to Kevin.
There might be because we've been told that there's the Underground Railroad from the slave time, so that could be a ley line. I'm thinking maybe the tunnel.
Yeah, there could be. And Johnny, you've brought up something important there. And again, it ties into the fact that group during World War II, they really were, into the occult, into the magic stuff. And obviously that's transferred over when they've moved over to America as well. They've taken some of that with them. But Chris, let me take you back to that basement now. And in particular, the heater and your experience when you went down there with Bill when he was actually conducting this exorcism.
It started to where when he came over, he said, it was out of the blue where he said, let's take some pictures. So I said to him, let's do that. Maybe we'll get some kind of new evidence that we can show somebody. And, he didn't know for sure if he was going to get something, but he was actually kind of pretty sure as we were doing stuff. He's like, I think we might really actually get something here. So more so in the basement. Didn't get much upstairs. We still have to go over a lot of the photos, but it was concentrated towards more of the basement. And I made sure I got almost like very quick snapshots of everything that he was doing. And it was just one of these incidents to where as he's going around the basement, we have these 4-foot high shadow creatures that we have. I think they're more resident to the basement, but we have seen them upstairs. One of them was following him all around the basement, and I have different photos of this thing going around where we have shadows on the floor. We have a little yellow eye that's looking out from one of the tables. And then when I have a back-to-back photo of it to where you see a yellow eye and then there's nothing. And then the picture before it, there was nothing. So you can see almost like nothing, yellow eye, nothing. And it's like timeline to like, what was that? And Bill actually told me later that he said he did see some kind of thing that was peeking out or looking at him from where the water heater area was, which is the far corner of the basement. But the most predominant picture that we got was that side of that heater to where you could see in other photos something is kind of manifesting on the side of this heater, almost forming either a hooded figure or some kind of figure. And then dead on, we did get a picture of, what we think is the big bad down in the basement. That's that, whatever we're going to call it, alien reptilian creature thing. And everyone can look at it on your website there if you have that up.
I think Bill's actually got it on his as well, and I'm trying to find a link for it here. But while I get that, now, let me just say, from my point of view, I would say that what you captured in that photograph on the metal surface, that certainly wasn't human, right?
Absolutely no, that's definitely not.
And from the shows I've watched and from the information that I've gleaned over the years doing this as well, there are spirits, and I don't even know if it's a spirit you would call it, but they call them elementals. Mm-hmm. They can almost shapeshift into like from 4-foot little kind of shadow things running about to what we've seen, that reflection that is so otherworldly. Mm-hmm. And again, for me, Chris, I can't, I'm no expert, but that definitely didn't look like anything friendly, and it didn't even look like anything from this world either. That was certainly something beyond the supernatural.
Yeah, I was shocked when I got it on the camera and I showed my mom immediately. I was like, look, I got a picture of him, and she was like, oh my God. Her hand immediately went to her mouth and was like, I don't know if I want to be in this basement anymore. And then Bill's going around and doing right in front of the old fireplace is when we heard the growl that it lasted very, very long, much longer than we'd heard in the past. And we almost wish that we had a voice recorder too. And I don't know why we didn't have a voice recorder, but I just was more interested in trying to get, follow Bill because he was moving around the basement very quickly and trying to get pictures and follow him. But that was we didn't hear growls too much in the basement up until till when Bill had come. But then getting that confirmation and then getting also that amazing picture, and then there's also some other pictures that we've seen later on to where that there's just it's just bizarre stuff on the side of that heater in conjunction. I may even be in that same picture with that creature. That above that picture and below that picture, there's other things going on that we were able to see. Now, I mean, you could maybe make it out if your eyes are different or maybe some other perspective from somebody else, but there are, we've come to see that there's like all different other kinds of, I don't know if there's an eye manifesting or somebody's walking, but there's a lot of different things, like little elements in that picture that are going on. But like we said before, we have so much that's going on in that basement down there that I wouldn't be surprised.
Now, did Bill pick up on any of the objects that came from your friend's house at all, Anita? Any of the artifacts? Like we heard earlier on about the Peruvian Mummy Doll, things like that. But did Bill pick up on anything at all like that while he was there?
Yeah, well, what he picked up was like I had put away some things that I came across early on in my friend's house and wrapped them up in a towel and put them in. And when I brought them home, I left them in. I actually put them in a drawer in the basement, a piece of furniture. I had a dream that these things would be important, and they turned out to be bayonets and I wasn't sure from what war they were from. But Bill told me, when I sent him a picture, he said, Anita, when I come there, this is really serious. And I didn't show him where the bayonets were kept. He went down the basement steps and went right to the bayonets, like where they were in the drawer. And he held on to it. He says, these things murdered people. He said, there's blood on these things. And he was just so very, very concerned about us having them in the house. So he bind and sealed them and, prayed over them. And then we've removed them from the house, and they are in another location because we didn't want them in the house. But when we were first going through things at my friend's house, we came across things and we just put them aside because we had such a monumental task in front of us. We weren't thinking of, oh, this is World War II stuff, or this is something connected to, an evil time or Nazis. None of that made any sense, really. The first 5 months in my friend's house, we did not have much activity until the basement at his house. We had to dig up the basement in one corner for a sump pump because we were getting water in the basement. It was creating black mold and a very bad health situation for us to continue working with that. And the lawyer that I was working with said, get in touch with a contractor, Anita, and the estate will pay for that to get fixed because you cannot be working in those conditions. And there's a lot more that you have to go through in the basement. So we did that. But when they dug up the basement, that's when things really started at my friend's house and escalated because we disturbed things that had not been disturbed for like 30 years in the basement. So that's, to me, it's like our house mimics in some way what he had in his basement. And I've said to Christopher, I said, our house has become like his house. We have his objects here that we had never dreamed of having, until he passed away. And now it's created a situation pretty much like what he had at his house, but we have an element of people who hadn't died at the time that my friend passed away and we were working at his house. But these Nazi officers had passed away in 2010, and apparently, they found some connection to be here, and Bill picked up on that also. He said, there's a really negative force down here, and he said there's multiple negative forces, and he did a ritual, which I explained in the second book, and it was really involved where, he had to really battle this dark energy down there, and we felt for a time that, a lot of this has been abated. But what happens is, portals open up again, and it's not through any fault of anybody. It's just the way, you could have, we had a lot of rain this summer. We've had a lot of, electrical, activity as far as a lot of thunderstorms. Also, if I move things around in the basement, trying to start clearing it out, I say in quotations, they don't like it, and they start the paranormal activity again. They don't want us to move around the objects and get rid of them. They want them to stay where they are. And we have a real problem now because we want to get rid of things, but if we do, then we start more problems, so we have to try to do it in increments. And it's not a good situation, to have.
Now, Johnny Whistles, you're looking at this photograph here, and I've shared it in the chat room over at tfrlive.com/chat. I've posted it again on the Kev Baker Show Facebook page, and there's a link in there. And if anyone's listening outside of the chat room, all you do is go to Facebook, the Kev Baker Show. Go in there. It's the last thing that's been posted. Johnny Whistles, that is far from anything that's in this world, right?
Now, Kev, that really, really looks creepy because, God almighty, when I looked at it at first, I thought, that looks like it's in a coffin, but when I blew the picture up...
I see what you're talking about with the kind of dark, where
yeah,
the light stops
it was the way the edge was coming down. It made it actually look like a coffin. But, how is that possible? Do you know what I mean? How can that face just appear, Kev? Do you know what I mean? That's pretty weird. Weird. That would frighten me.
Yeah, it's one of the kind of strangest and most compelling images I've seen from a haunted location. And Anita, this is from somebody, myself and my partner, we watch far too many hours of these paranormal shows. I can tell you, if any of these paranormal investigators came up with something like this, I would imagine that they would probably see it as the highlight of their investigations. And again, that's because they're just investigating. They're not actually having to live with these things. So, I mean, my heart goes out to you and Chris. I really do. Now, do you think it's obviously, in fact, this is actually a mute question because Chris said he felt something earlier on going down to the basement. So this portal, it still seems rather active, right? Yes.
In fact, while he had this happen to him today, I noticed this morning we have a first floor bathroom, and then we have also one upstairs, which has had activity in that bathroom. But this bathroom, we have 3 parts to a mirror that you open from the bottom. There's no handles or anything on the mirrors, but they're in sections. We get fingerprints between 2 sections of the mirrored glass, and they're fingerprints that Bill was here and we took pictures of it, and Bill saw the fingerprints and he said, these don't look human, but they look like child's fingerprints. And this seems to be a favorite for them, that whoever is here, they like to leave their fingerprints, and we'll document it, but then we wipe them off. Well, this morning there's more fingerprints on the mirror, and it's directly above where the basement where we have the portal. And Bill has told us, there's mirrors are a way for some spirits to interact, to go in and out of a dimension. And for some reason, the centerpiece mirror, the fingerprints go all the way up in between where you can't get your hands in to open that section up. You have to go underneath, the little section to open the mirror to get to the,
you're never putting your hands on the mirror.
Yeah, you're never putting your hands on the mirror. You're going underneath.
You wouldn't have any fingerprints on the mirror.
But these fingerprints are like in between going, and I'm going to see if there's more. Each day there tends to be, they go right up the mirror, that there'll be a set of prints, and it goes up, and then after a while, like, I'm tired of looking at them. I go, okay, I documented it. Now I'm wiping these off again. But this happens all the time.
If I'm ever in the US, and I hope to get there sometime soon, really do. I was going to say I'll come for a cup of tea, but I might just come to the shop instead, right? I think that would be safer. Absolutely.
Oh, yeah, come for tea. I'll make you homemade.
She'll make you tea at the shop.
Biscottis, Italian biscottis. We'll have you with the tea, and we'll have scones. And I'll tell you, we'd love to have you come.
Tea and scones. Oh, you know the way to my heart. But we're almost out of time. And Chris, Anita, I can't thank you enough for sharing with us what at times has been a harrowing story. But your energy, the two of you together, I mean, I can tell you're a very, very close family. And I think and I hope that really sees you through the worst of this, no matter what's to come in the future. And I pray nothing else happens. However, I think the closeness, the bond that the both of you have, I think that triumphs over any of these dark forces every day of the week.
Well, thank you, Kevin. And we believe that too. And I know Bill's picked up on that we are a force to be reckoned with. We're not going to be frightened out of our home. We've worked too hard to be here. Whatever wants to coexist. I mean, if they want to do it peacefully and they don't want to move on, I mean, we'll certainly invite you to, you want to haunt the place, but, just don't bother us, if you can't move on. But it is with this darker energy that Bill's always aware of, that, we have to be careful of, because there's some things here that, they don't want to move on, because it's far better for them to stay in this kind of limbo existence, it seems, because they don't want to face the music, because it's much more terrible for them to move on.
Almost out of time. I'm so sorry. But myself and Anita, we both contributed to Bill's latest book, Stranger Than Fiction. An absolutely amazing book from cover to cover. I want to thank you both so much for coming along tonight. And to everyone out there around the world, stay safe, and wherever you are, make it PNR.
And didn't touch that dial.
God bless you all.